Deep in the Chiapas jungle, just 2 leagues from the town of San Cristobal, there stands a chapel that no one dares to visit after sunset. The locals lower their voices when speaking of it, and the elders cross themselves whenever its name is mentioned. The Chapel of Santa Inés. They say that within its stone walls, a figure dressed in a black habit wanders during nights of the full moon. Her feet do not touch the ground, and her eyes are 2 wells of darkness that gaze straight into the soul. Those who have dared to enter after dusk swear they've heard her laments, prayers in Latin that twist into screams of agony. Today, we will uncover the true story of the nun who condemned not only her own soul, but also that of an entire town. A secret the church has tried to bury for more than 3 centuries. This is the tale of Sister Catalina, and the curse that still weighs upon the Chapel of Santa Inés. If you enjoy chilling mysteries like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Each week we bring you new tales that will leave you breathless. Now let us return to Chiapas to discover what happened on that fateful night of 1697. San Cristobal de las Casas was a prosperous settlement in the heart of Chiapas at the end of the 17th century. Founded by Spanish conquistadors, the town stood as a bastion of Catholic faith in the midst of indigenous lands. Cobbled streets wound between adobe houses with red-tiled roofs, while the central plaza hosted a market where the Tzotzil and Celtal natives traded goods with Spanish colonists. Unlike the imposing cathedral that dominated the town center, the Chapel of Santa Inés stood on the outskirts, in a clearing surrounded by lush vegetation. It was a modest building, erected in 1650 from gray stone and dark wood, with a bell tower barely peeking above the trees. Despite its simplicity, the chapel was renowned for its beautiful stained glass windows depicting the martyrdom of Saint Agnes, specially brought from Spain. The light that filtered through them created a spectacle of colors that the faithful regarded as a divine blessing. Attached to the chapel was a small convent where 6 nuns of the Order of St. Clare lived. They embraced austerity, dedicating themselves to prayer, cultivating medicinal herbs, and teaching indigenous girls. Among them stood out Sister Catalina de la Cruz, a young novice barely 20 years old, from a noble family in Mexico City. Of unusual beauty and piercing gaze, she had arrived 3 years earlier, fleeing an arranged marriage, or so it was said. The Mother Superior, Sister Angela de la Concepcion, a strict woman who had ruled the convent with an iron hand for 2 decades, looked with suspicion upon Catalina's growing popularity among the natives. Whispers spread that the young novice had the gift of healing and could communicate with the locals in their own tongue, even though she had never studied it. The bishop, Bartolomé de Sierra, a corpulent man with a stern face, frequently visited the humble chapel from Guatemala City. His unusual interest in that modest convent sparked rumors. Some claimed he was keeping a close watch on Sister Catalina. Others suggested he was searching for something hidden within the chapel grounds. The region was in turmoil. Repression against indigenous practices had intensified after several uprisings. Dominicans and Franciscans competed to convert souls, while the Holy Office extended its reach into Chiapas, persecuting any deviation from Catholic doctrine. Amid this climate of tension and religious fervor, the Chapel of Santa Inés seemed a refuge of apparent peace. Every Sunday, Spanish settlers and mestizos attended Mass, officiated by Father Francisco Núñez, a middle-aged priest known for his fiery sermons on hell and punishment. After the service, the faithful left coins and offerings before the image of the Virgin Mary, a wooden statue whose eyes, it was said, shed tears during Holy Week. No one could imagine that this modest chapel, with its rose garden and silent bell tower, would soon become the stage for events that would shake the faith of an entire region and give birth to a legend that would endure for centuries. On October 12, 1697, night fell upon San Cristobal, shrouded in an unusual fog that descended from the mountains like a funeral shroud. The village dogs howled endlessly, and nocturnal birds fell into an eerie silence. It was the eve of the feast of Saint Agnes, and inside the chapel the nuns were making preparations for the next day's celebration. That afternoon, Father Francisco had departed for Guatemala on the bishop's orders, leaving the nuns in charge. Shortly before sunset, several witnesses saw Sister Catalina venture deep into the jungle, returning later with a bundle of strange herbs. Miguel Hernandez, a merchant passing along the road, claimed he had seen her speaking with an old indigenous woman who vanished among the trees like a shadow. The nun was different, Hernandez declared days later. Her eyes shone as if with fever, and she murmured words that were neither Latin nor Spanish. When she saw me, she startled and quickly hid something within the folds of her habit. At midnight, while the town slept, Dona Luisa de Mendoza, whose hacienda stood near the chapel, was awakened by a chant that froze the blood in her veins. It was not the usual prayers of the nuns, but an ancient melody that seemed to rise from the very bowels of the earth. Looking through her window, she saw flickering lights in the bell tower, and a column of smoke rising toward the full moon. Alarmed, she sent her foreman to investigate. The man returned pale, unable to speak for hours. When he finally found his words, he claimed he had seen, through a window, the 6 nuns standing in a circle at the altar. At the center, the crucifix was gone. Instead, a strange symbol had been drawn in what appeared to be blood. Catalina led the ceremony, her arms extended, while the other nuns swayed to the rhythm of a song in an unknown tongue. Shortly after midnight, a greenish glow lit up the stained glass windows of the chapel. Those few who witnessed it swore the bells rang on their own, tolling frantically and waking the entire town. Then came the scream, a shriek, inhuman and thunderous, that tore through the night like lightning. And then silence. At dawn, the first rays of sunlight revealed a macabre scene. The chapel doors stood wide open, and on the threshold lay the twisted body of Sister Angela, the Mother Superior. Her eyes, frozen in indescribable terror, stared at the heavens. Her hands clutched a wooden rosary, while her neck bore the marks of fingers, as if someone, or something, had strangled her. Inside, chaos reigned. Candles had been toppled, the crucifix torn down, and the walls were splattered with a dark, foul-smelling liquid. On the altar lay a parchment inscribed with symbols mixing Christian iconography with ancient Maya glyphs. At the center, an inverted cross made of branches from the so-called Tree of Spirits, sacred to the natives. The 5 remaining nuns were found unconscious in different corners of the chapel, all alive, except one. Sister Catalina had vanished without a trace. When the survivors awoke, none claimed to remember what had happened, or so they insisted. Only one, Sister Maria de la Piedad, the youngest after Catalina, sobbed incoherently about the door and what came out of it. Among the debris of the altar, the villagers discovered a small iron chest with Latin inscriptions. Inside were a black rosary with beads resembling obsidian, and a silver key shaped like a cross, a key no one could match to any lock. Bishop Bartolome ordered these objects sealed in a lead box and buried in a secret place. The news of the sacrilege spread like wildfire through the region. The Holy Office sent 2 inquisitors from Mexico City to investigate what soon became known as the Night of the Heretic Nun. The years that followed the desecration of Santa Inés were marked by darkness for San Cristobal. Misfortunes struck as if by a merciless curse. First came the drought, ruining the harvest for 3 consecutive years. Then a mysterious fever epidemic claimed the lives of dozens of children. The natives insisted it was punishment from their ancient gods for allowing sacred secrets to be stolen. The Inquisition concluded its inquiry with a grim verdict. Sister Catalina had committed heresy, witchcraft, and apostasy. The remaining 5 nuns were exiled to different convents in Spain, forbidden to ever speak of what had transpired. The chapel was purified in rituals that lasted 7 days and 7 nights, then reconsecrated under strict Dominican watch. But the faithful never returned. The place bore the indelible mark of sacrilege. The stained glass, once radiant with divine colors, now filtered a sickly light. The flowers in the garden withered too soon, and the water from the well turned bitter, a bitterness no prayer could cleanse. 50 years later, in 1747, a French traveler named Jean-Baptiste Mars visited San Cristobal. In his diary he wrote, "They showed me an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of town. No inhabitant dares approach it after dusk. They tell me the story of a nun who made a pact with the devil and vanished." What intrigued him most was that many swore they had seen a woman in a black habit walking around the building during nights of the full moon. The natives called her the guardian of the door. When Mars asked which door they meant, the locals refused to answer and turned away, making protective signs against evil. Skeptical, the traveler decided to spend a night inside the abandoned chapel. No one knows what he saw or heard, but the next morning he left town in haste, abandoning most of his belongings at the inn. Years later, when his diary was discovered in Paris, it contained only one final entry about San Cristobal, a crude sketch of a female figure with a blurred face. Beneath it, a Latin phrase, Custodio portam ad inferos, I guard the gate to hell. As decades passed, the chapel fell further into ruin. The roof partially collapsed, vegetation invaded the cloister, yet the stained glass windows miraculously remained intact, still depicting the martyrdom of Saint Agnes. In 1820, after Mexico's independence, the local authorities decided to demolish the chapel to build a school. The workers hired were all outsiders, no local dared touch the place. While dismantling the altar stone, they discovered a hollow space beneath. Inside was a leather-bound book marked with the seal of the Inquisition. When opened, it revealed pages written in two inks, black for the official Spanish text, and reddish-brown for frenzied marginal notes, scribbled in haste and fear. The book turned out to be the personal diary of Inquisitor Alonso Ramirez de Vargas, the man who had led the 1697 investigation. Among the official records, he had written private observations that he had never sent to Spain. One entry read, "Today I interrogated Sister Maria for the 5th time. At last she spoke of the ceremony. She claimed that Sister Catalina had assured them she had found the method to speak with angels. Knowledge revealed to the ancient Maya by the Virgin Mary herself, centuries before the conquest. Catalina convinced them it was no heresy, but a forgotten divine revelation. At midnight, they performed the ritual, drawing symbols copied from an old codex. According to Maria, once the circle was completed, the air in the chapel grew heavy, and the stained glass began to tremble. Then, the ground beneath the altar split open, revealing steps descending into darkness. Catalina went down carrying a candle, disappearing into the abyss. But what returned? It wore Catalina's face, yet it was not her. Her eyes had become bottomless pits, and her voice was no longer human. The Mother Superior tried to stop her. And then, I cannot write more. I have ordered that the opening beneath the altar be sealed. May God protect us if anyone ever finds it again." The discovery of this diary caused a sensation, but before the authorities could examine it thoroughly, both the book and the foreman who had found it mysteriously vanished. The demolition was halted. The chapel was left as it was, half-collapsed, smothered in vines, and avoided even in broad daylight. For decades, the story of Sister Catalina lingered only as a local legend, a tale told to frighten disobedient children. Behave, or the nun of the chapel will come for you in your sleep. On September 15, 1897, exactly 200 years after the infamous events, a Spanish historian named Eduardo Salazar arrived in San Cristobal. Fascinated by the chronicles of the Inquisition in the New World, he was gathering material for a book on syncretic rituals between Catholicism and indigenous beliefs. He lodged at the home of Don Fernando Villalobos, a descendant of one of the region's oldest families. One evening at dinner, Don Fernando casually mentioned that his family had long been custodians of certain objects related to the matter of the chapel. "My great-great-grandfather was an alguacil during the investigation," he explained. "Some documents and relics were entrusted to him. Things that were not to be destroyed, but neither to be exposed to indiscreet eyes. They have been kept under lock and key for generations." Intrigued, Salazar asked to examine them. After some hesitation, Don Fernando agreed, though warning that many believed the objects cursed. From a carved wooden chest, he produced a bundle wrapped in wax cloth. Inside were revealed a black rosary, a small vial containing a thick, dark liquid, and a worn notebook. "This is the personal diary of Sister Maria de la Piedad," Villalobos explained. "It was written during her confinement in Spain, where she died in 1710. My ancestor obtained it from one of her relatives who later returned to Chiapas." Salazar spent the entire night reading the diary. At dawn, his face was ghastly pale, and his hands trembled uncontrollably as he took breakfast. He then requested permission to visit the ruins of the chapel. Though reluctant, Don Fernando agreed, insisting on accompanying him, along with 2 armed servants. The old Chapel of Santa Inés was barely recognizable. Only parts of the walls remained, engulfed by vegetation. Miraculously, the stone frame that once held the famous stained glass windows still stood, though the glass itself lay in shattered fragments scattered among the weeds. Salazar walked among the ruins like a man possessed, constantly consulting the diary and comparing passages with the stones he examined. At last, he stopped before what had once been the altar. "Here," he whispered, pointing to a moss-covered slab. According to Sister Maria's diary, the entrance lies beneath this stone. Don Fernando tried to dissuade him, but the historian's determination was unshakable. Reluctantly, the servants began clearing away vegetation and earth. After an hour, a square slab was revealed, etched with a symbol, a Latin cross intersected by a circle. Exactly as Maria described. Salazar murmured with feverish excitement. "This is no pagan mark as the Inquisitors believed. It is far older, predating even the Maya." Catalina had discovered something reaching back to the earliest days of Christianity. Together they heaved the slab aside, exposing a dark opening and the beginning of a staircase spiraling downward. A putrid stench rose from below, like the breath of a violated tomb. One servant crossed himself and refused to continue. Salazar lit a lantern and began descending, followed reluctantly by Don Fernando and the remaining servant. The steps, carved into solid rock, wound deep into the earth. Symbols were etched along the walls, strange combinations of crosses, stars, and unknown glyphs. At the bottom, they reached a small circular chamber of stone. In its center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a blackened silver chest. Around the pedestal, the ground bore a perfect circle marked with inscriptions in Latin, and in tongues far more ancient. "It is the seal," Salazar whispered. Sister Maria described it in detail. Catalina told them this was the gate through which angels could manifest in our world. But it was not angels she was summoning. With trembling hands, the historian pulled from his satchel the vial shown to him by Don Fernando. "This contains blood," he explained. According to the diary, it is the blood of Sister Angela, collected the night of her death. Catalina believed it was the final ingredient needed to complete the ritual. Before they could stop him, Salazar poured the thick, dark liquid onto the circle. To their horror, it moved on its own, tracing the ancient lines as if alive. The chamber shook violently. Dust and pebbles rained from above. The air thickened, suffocating. And then, the silver chest upon the pedestal opened by itself. Don Fernando screamed and fled up the stairs, the terrified servant close behind. Salazar, however, remained, transfixed by what lay inside. A parchment, and upon it, a mummified human hand clutching a silver key. As he reached toward it, a shrill cry erupted, not from above, but from the very walls around them. A woman's scream that twisted into inhuman laughter. That afternoon, Eduardo Salazar was last seen emerging from the ruins, his face frozen in horror, carrying something bundled in his coat. He never returned to Don Fernando's house. 3 days later, a shepherd boy found his corpse at the edge of a ravine, miles away. His eyes had been torn out, and on his chest was seared the imprint of a small hand, like that of a woman. The silver chest, the parchment, and the mummified hand were never found. Authorities concluded Salazar had fallen victim to bandits, a convenient explanation no one believed, yet everyone accepted, eager to close the matter. Traumatized, Don Fernando sold his properties and moved to Mexico City, where he lived in seclusion until his death in 1905. But before leaving, he sent a letter to the Bishop of Chiapas along with Sister Maria's diary, recounting all that had occurred. The church responded by dispatching 3 priests to bless the ruins and seal the underground entrance once again, this time with cement, stones, and prayers. In 1910, as the Mexican Revolution loomed, local authorities decided to fence off the area around the ruins of the chapel to prevent accidents. During the work, laborers made a disturbing discovery. The stone slab sealing the underground chamber had been moved, its sacred seals broken. Someone, or something, had come out. That same year, a mysterious woman arrived in San Cristobal. She called herself Isabel Alvarado, a historian interested in local legends. Her unusual beauty and intense fascination with the Chapel of Santa Inés aroused suspicion. especially when it became known that she had rented an abandoned house only a few steps from the ruins. The town librarian, Martin Ochoa, spent the most time with her. Later he would recall, Miss Alvarado knew details about the chapel that appear in no book. When I asked how she knew them, she smiled strangely and said, "Some memories persist across centuries." There was something hypnotic in her gaze. She spent hours examining old maps of the region, particularly intrigued by the nearby cave systems. One stormy night, Isabel invited Martin to her house. There she showed him what she claimed to be an extraordinary discovery, an ancient parchment, predating the Spanish conquest. It was a map, Martin later said. It showed a system of caves beneath the region, marked with symbols blending Christian and Mayan iconography. Isabel claimed the first missionaries had discovered something in those caves, something the church had hidden for centuries. According to her, Sister Catalina had not died or disappeared in 1697. She had found a secret, and now Isabel intended to finish what Catalina had begun. When Martin pressed her for clarity, Isabel opened a chest and revealed an object that chilled him to the bone. A black rosary, identical to the one described generations earlier by Don Fernando Villalobos. "This is the Rosary of Shadows," Isabel declared. "Each bead represents a door between worlds. Catalina only managed to open the first. I will open the rest." Terrified, Martin excused himself and ran through the storm to the parish church, where he found the new priest, Father Domingo Vasquez, preparing for evening Massachusetts. He poured out everything he had seen and heard. Unlike his skeptical predecessor, Father Vasquez took the account seriously. He immediately sent a telegram to the diocese and urged the mayor to place guards around Isabel's house. But when the gendarmes arrived, they found it empty. Isabel Alvarado had vanished, taking all her belongings, except one. On the table lay the parchment map she had shown Martin, alongside a handwritten note in an elegant, old-fashioned script. What began in 1697 must be completed. The door awaits its guardian. Do not try to stop me, for tonight, under the full moon, the circle will be closed. Father Vasquez, Martin, and several armed men rushed to the chapel ruins. The storm raged, lightning splitting the sky and illuminating the skeletal silhouette of the crumbling structure. At the gate, they found the lock broken, and beside it, discarded women's garments, a modern coat, shoes, and a handbag bearing the name Isabel Alvarado. Beyond, advancing toward the ruins, they saw a figure dressed in black, but she no longer wore modern clothes. Instead, she was clad in the worn habit of a Clare nun. "Stop!" cried Father Vasquez. The figure turned slowly. Beneath the hood was not Isabel's face. Her features had transformed, at once younger and older, like a wax mask half melted. Yet most terrifying were her eyes. Utterly black, without iris or pupil, abyssal voids that swallowed the lantern light. 213 years have passed, the woman said, her voice echoing not just from her throat but from every direction at once. "The seal is broken. The door is open. And I have returned to finish what I began." A lightning bolt struck the ruins, blinding them momentarily. When their vision cleared, the woman was gone. One of the men shouted that he saw her entering the gaping hole in the earth where the altar had once stood, descending the spiral staircase first uncovered by Eduardo Salazar 13 years earlier. Summoning all his courage, Father Vasquez lifted a crucifix high. "Whatever this creature intends to do, we must stop her. If she truly is Sister Catalina, she has evaded divine justice for more than 2 centuries." Only 4 men, including Martin and the priest, dared follow into the spiraling depths. The darkness below was suffocating, as though it consumed not only the light of their lanterns, but also the warmth of their bodies and the sound of their footsteps. The air grew dense and cold, saturated with a sweet, rotten smell, like flowers left too long in a tomb. At last they reached the circular chamber. There she stood, Isabel, or Catalina, or whatever now inhabited that body. She stood in the center of the circle. The black rosary floated around her, each bead glowing with an unnatural purple light. Beneath her feet, the floor had vanished, replaced by a yawning pit that seemed bottomless. From its depths rose a greenish glow that lit her face from below, giving her the appearance of a specter. "In the name of God, stop!" cried Father Vasquez, stepping forward with the crucifix. The woman smiled. A smile too wide for a human face. "God," she answered with that many-voiced tone. "He has no power here. This place existed before your God, before any God. It is the primordial gate, the passage between worlds that the ancients knew and revered. The Maya built their temple above it to contain it. Then you came and built your church, blind to what lay beneath." Martín trembled but forced himself to ask, "What is it you want?" Her abyssal eyes fixed on him. "To complete what I began in 1697. To open all the doors. To free those who wait on the other side." Catalina discovered the truth in a Mayan codex the Dominicans tried to destroy. Beyond the gate dwell not angels, not demons, but beings older than mankind, the true heirs of the earth. As she spoke, the beads of the rosary spun faster, and the pit emitted a guttural sound, as though the earth itself groaned. "I need only one final offering," she declared, extending her hand. "One willing soul to complete the circle." What happened next unfolded so quickly that the witnesses could scarcely comprehend it. Like a man hypnotized, Martín stepped forward toward the woman. Father Vasquez tried to stop him, seizing his arm, but Martín wrenched free with unnatural strength. His eyes were glazed, his voice distant. "I will follow you, Catalina. I knew it from the moment I first saw you." The other men recoiled in terror, realizing their companion was under some supernatural influence. Only Father Vasquez remained firm, chanting Latin prayers and brandishing the crucifix. The woman stretched out her hand toward Martín. He advanced to the very edge of the pit, but before he could take her hand, the priest thrust himself between them. "You will not touch him. By the blood of Christ, I command you, return to hell." The woman growled, a guttural sound no human throat should produce. With a flick of her hand, she hurled Father Vasquez against the stone wall. He crumpled, the crucifix falling from his grasp. That instant of distraction broke her hold over Martín. He blinked, suddenly aware of where he was and what was happening. He saw the crucifix lying just inches from the abyss. Desperate, he dove for it, but the woman seized his ankle. The pull was so strong he felt his bones crack. "Do not resist," she whispered, her voice now strangely tender. "We will show you wonders no human has ever seen. We will give you knowledge not even angels possess." Through sheer agony, Martín drove the crucifix into her hand. An inhuman shriek tore from her throat as she released him. Martín scrambled back, gasping. One of the men shouted, "The rosary! Destroy the rosary!" The woman roared, and the black beads spun wildly around her, forming a blur. From the pit rose tentacles of green mist, solidifying into shapes impossible to describe in human words. Father Vasquez, regaining consciousness, saw the horror unfolding. With his last strength, he pulled a small vial of holy water from his pocket and hurled it at the swirling rosary. The glass shattered in midair. Drops of holy water splashed the beads, which hissed like red-hot iron plunged into cold water. The woman screamed, her skin peeling away to reveal something ancient, something that should never have worn a human form. The rosary halted and fell, beads scattering across the floor. Some rolled into the pit, which rumbled furiously as the green light flickered like a dying flame. "No!" she shrieked, diving for the scattered beads. "Not now, not when I was so close." Martín seized the moment. Ignoring the pain in his leg, he grabbed the priest's prayer book, which still lay at his side. Opening to a bookmarked page, he began reciting the words of exorcism he had once read idly in the parish library. "Exorcizamuste, omnis immundus spiritus, omnis satanica potestas." The woman convulsed as if each word lashed her with fire. Her face shifted uncontrollably. One moment Isabel's youthful features, the next a stern nun, then something monstrous beyond comprehension. "Fool!" she shrieked with her many voices. "I am no demon. I am older than your God, older than the angels themselves." But the exorcism had power nonetheless. The pit began to close, its green glow fading. The remaining beads cracked one by one, releasing black smoke that dissolved into the air. The woman collapsed to her knees at the edge of the pit, her body writhing, her face flickering between forms. Her voice grew suddenly fragile, almost human. "You cannot stop it. You only delay it. The door exists. The beads can be remade. I will return, as I always have. Then, for a heartbeat, her eyes became human again, filled with infinite sorrow. Help me, she whispered. I'm not her. She trapped me. I am Isabel. Please. Martin faltered, lowering the book. But one of the men grabbed his shoulder. It's a trick. Don't stop. Martin, regaining his resolve, continued the exorcism. The woman's final mask slipped. Her face twisted into something so horrific the men averted their eyes. I curse you, she roared. As I cursed all who tried to stop me. Your descendants will pay. The door will wait. It will always wait. The pit slammed shut with a thunderous roar. An invisible force swept through the chamber, extinguishing the lanterns and throwing them all to the ground. In total darkness, they heard one last desperate scream. Then silence. When they relit their lamps, the woman was gone. Only the black nun's habit remained, empty like a discarded skin. The rosary was reduced to ash. The pit had vanished, replaced by solid stone as if it had never existed. Gravely injured but conscious, Father Vasquez looked at the place where she had stood, then at Martin. It is not over, he whispered weakly. It never ends. We have only sent her back for now. In the days that followed, the story of what had occurred in the ruins of the Chapel of Santa Inés spread through San Cristobal like wildfire. The civil authorities tried to suppress it, fearing it would tarnish the town's image, but rumors persisted. Father Vasquez, once recovered from his injuries, wrote urgently to the bishop, insisting the church take drastic measures. The ruins were completely demolished. The rubble was blessed, then buried beneath tons of cement. On the site they built a small hermitage dedicated to the Virgin of Guadalupe, guarded day and night by Dominican friars. Martin Ochoa, meanwhile, became the unofficial custodian of the tale. He collected every available document on the case of Sister Catalina and the events of 1897 and 1910, keeping them in a special archive at the library. His leg never fully healed from that night. He walked with a cane for the rest of his life. Many whispered that this was the price he paid for gazing directly at what lay beyond the door. The other two men who had descended into the chamber met very different fates. One left San Cristobal forever, desperate to forget what he had seen. The other drowned himself in drink, muttering in his stupors about black eyes that still watch me, until his premature death a year later. As for Isabel Alvarado, no trace of her true identity was ever found. The documents left in her house turned out to be clever forgeries. Authorities concluded she was an imposter, perhaps an antiquities thief seeking relics among the ruins. But some whispered the unthinkable, that Isabel had never truly existed, that she was merely a vessel, created, possessed, or shaped by something far older. Time passed. The hermitage built over the ruins became a minor pilgrimage site. Few knew its true history. To most visitors, it was simply another example of Mexican Catholic devotion. Yet from time to time, especially during nights of the full moon, residents of nearby houses reported hearing footsteps pacing across the stone floor of the hermitage. Footsteps that left no tracks. Occasionally, a pilgrim swore they had seen a nun in a black habit praying before the altar, a figure that vanished the moment they tried to approach or speak to her. In 1950, 40 years after the events of 1910, an elderly Martin Ochoa finally wrote down his complete memoirs of the case. On the final page, he added a chilling note. She visits me in my dreams. Always the same nightmare. I am back in that underground chamber, alone with her. She shows me the rosary rebuilt, one bead for each decade since our encounter. She says she only needs one more, the 9th, for the circle to be complete. When I wake, my injured leg throbs as though the wound were fresh, and sometimes I find dirt beneath my nails, as if I had been digging in the night. I fear that when I die, she will use my passing as a bridge to return to this world. I have left precise instructions. When my time comes, my body must be cremated at once and my ashes scattered in running water, so that not even my remains may serve her as an anchor. On October 12, 1952, exactly 255 years after the original events in the chapel, Martin Ochoa died peacefully in his sleep. His instructions were carried out to the letter. For decades afterward, calm returned to San Cristobal. New generations gradually forgot the legend of the heretic nun. The hermitage remained standing, though visited by fewer pilgrims with each passing year. In the spring of 2005, a young archaeologist named Carmen Salazar arrived in San Cristobal. She was working on her doctoral thesis, focused on local legends. She bore the same surname as the Spanish historian Eduardo Salazar, who had vanished a century earlier, though she claimed to know of no family connection. Carmen spent weeks in the municipal library, carefully studying the archive compiled by Martín Ochoa. One night, the librarian found her absorbed in an old fragment, a recovered page from the diary of Sister María de la Piedad. "It's fascinating," Carmen said, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "The description of the ritual, the symbols, they align with pre-Christian cults that existed in this region. I believe Sister Catalina truly discovered something ancient, not mere superstition." The librarian, who was a descendant of Martín's family, grew uneasy. She had noticed the young archaeologist wore a peculiar pendant, a single black bead, strung on a silver chain. "Where did you find that?" the librarian asked. Carmen smiled and touched it reverently. "It's curious you ask. I found it buried near the hermitage. I was taking some measurements when I felt an urge to dig at a specific spot. It was waiting there for me, and ever since I've worn it. I've had dreams, vivid dreams of a nun from the 17th century. She shows me an incomplete rosary. She tells me she's been waiting for me, that I am the 9th and final one." The librarian recoiled, remembering her grandfather's old warning. "If ever you see a black bead like obsidian, do not touch it. And if you see someone wearing it, stay away." That very night, an unexpected storm struck San Cristobal. Lightning crashed directly onto the hermitage, setting it ablaze. Amid the chaos, as townsfolk rushed to put out the fire, no one noticed a female figure slipping away from the site, holding something that glimmered in her hand. By dawn, when the flames were finally extinguished, firefighters made a disturbing discovery. The fire had burned through the floor of the hermitage, revealing not cement as had long been believed, but a stone slab carved with a familiar symbol, a cross intersected by a circle. At its center ran a fresh crack, from which seeped a strange, sweet, rotting scent, like decaying flowers. That same day, Carmen Salazar vanished. She left behind all her belongings at the hotel, except her notebook, and presumably the obsidian bead pendant. Some claim to have seen her walking toward the mountains, where ancient Mayan legends speak of caves plunging deep into the earth. Caves so deep, they say, they reach other worlds. This mystery reminds us, there are secrets humanity was never meant to know, doors that should never be opened. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything has truly been revealed? If you enjoyed this tale and want more chilling stories like it, subscribe, activate the bell, and share it with someone who loves dark mysteries. See you in the next story.